When we're talking about maintaining our locks at home, the first thing I want you to know is that it's a process. Not only is it a process in itself of how we care for our locks, but learning this is a process. And so that's what I'm really getting at, is that it comes with muscle memory. It comes with doing stuff over and over again. And the more we do those things, the more it becomes part of our routine. And we start to have this routine that now has muscle memory attached to it, that now comes off a lot faster than it did in the beginning. And not only that, it is nowhere near as daunting as it seems in the beginning when you're researching all these things and trying to find out how to maintain our locks.
So if you don't know, my name is Shane Fallon. This is where we talk about hair. I've been studying hair since 2006, and I first started wearing locks on my head and studying locks back in '99. So you can imagine I might have a little info for you.
The first thing I bring my client through is, what are we trying to accomplish? And what we're trying to accomplish is the hairs, as they grow in the section of lock that we have, they will fall out one by one here and there in the telogen phase. And so as they fall out in the telogen phase of hair growth, that hair winds up into the lock, and we want to aid those hairs up in, as well as continuously put the hairs back in that go around in that lock, back into that lock, so when they grow, they can continuously grow and then fall out into that lock. We don't want to break the hairs, because locks in and of themselves are a protective style. So we are just patiently waiting for those hairs to fall out and placing them where we want them until that happens. This is done with twist and lock and some gel and some twist into styles until the hair's been in that style long enough for enough hair to fall out that when we pull that style back out, we comb the hair up and that gets into the lock, and then we place those hairs back into that lock and put it back into a style again. With crochet, we're essentially replacing gel in this instance with our crochet and weaving the hair in this spot where all these hairs converge that go into this specific lock. So the crochet essentially replaces the gel in this instance, right? Where we also see things like my tie string, where this placement goes. Some people utilize single-ended extensions, where this maintenance goes, different things like this, and they will essentially work because we are after the cycles of the hair growth. And so we're essentially just working off of those and training the hair to go into each lock. Now that we understand what we're after, we can also understand that all of these manners that we hear about in maintaining our locks are viable manners. It's more about what fits your lifestyle and what you want to add in. This is where I get into some personal stuff, because for me, maintaining my locks is caring for the crown of my head. So when I'm caring for my locks, it's a much different headspace and heart space that goes into it than, say, styling my hair or any of those things, right? Where they're much quicker done, put together. If we take all of that time that it takes to style or do whatever, wash and condition and comb through or whatever it is, we take all of that and bunch it up into one day, into one beautiful self-care day, where you're caring for the crown of your head, you're cleansing everything, you're cleaning it out, you're rolling it back out and stretching out these sweaters while they dry. This gives us a moment to slow down, but not only slow down, we're honoring the crown of our head, our seventh chakra, essentially, if you really want to get some woo-woo about it. And in fact, much more work with the energetics of these things anyways. These are, the view I have on locks is that they're very energetic. They harness and hold our energy. To me, this is a very powerful thing. And so when I care for them, I like to care for them with intention. When I care for my locks, I care for them with intention. And I separate with intention, and I place things where they go. If I'm in an opposing mood that I don't want to put into that, I try not to fiddle with them a whole lot with my hands, because that's where a lot of energy expels. And so for me, when I'm doing at-home maintenance, I like to even be in the right mindset, as well as like maybe even like have it be more of a ritualistic thing, right? Because this is a routine, which, you know, slowly builds over time. And as it slowly builds over time, it becomes ours, right? And so any suggestion that you hear to do maintenance is almost all worthwhile trying. I wouldn't suggest, if you've got crocheted hair or freeform locks or backcombed or whatever, that I wouldn't suggest necessarily jumping into interlocked hair. The thing with interlocking is it's creating an everlasting square knot that will continuously become a square knot as it grows. And so it's not necessarily a lock or a dreadlock that has hair that's matted and locked turned into a round rope by this factor. Because of the overlapping and tightness of hair, that hair never actually falls out from the base and locks up into the lock, which is what we're accomplishing when we're doing maintenance. And so it doesn't quite work for actual locks. It works for interlocked locks, and that's it. Now back to what we're accomplishing at home with our maintenance. When we get a fresh set of locks, they're wily, they're fuzzy, they're crazy, they kind of go all over the place. We don't want to keep hats or wraps on them at all times or anything like this. And anytime they come out of a style or taken out of a wrap, we want to go through and finger brush and separate everything. If you do this at least every day, I promise you won't have a whole lot of problems with things growing together ever. Though it does have to be done on a daily basis, especially in the beginning. Because of the fuzziness and because the hair doesn't quite know what to do yet, it's gonna wanna go different places and go different ways. And so us keeping it separated and even coming up and fidgeting with those bases and different things to keep stuff going where we want it to go will really help aid these locks and your hair figuring out where it wants to go. Once we've gotten up there enough, our fingers start to know the way around the back of our head, around the partitions of our head. This comes in handy because every time we're shampooing, we really need to be separating before the shampoo, cleansing everything, rinsing really, really, really well, like a bunch. Let it fill up and squish out and fill up and squish out a bunch of times and get it to run clean with no bubbles. And then from that point, when we're drying and we're in a towel, we pull our stuff out of the towel. We're now, 80% dry or so. We go through and separate everything again. And this is where the diligence comes in, because with woven fabric, if it's a nice woven fabric like a cashmere sweater or a nice wool sweater, we need to treat it as such, where when we wash it, we hand wash it. When we dry these things, typically they're dried on a board and you stretch them over a board and let them air dry and flip them and let them air dry and stretch them again. So our locks are a woven fabric now at this point in time. So we want to actually take these locks and take the moment to separate everything out, put the hair where it goes on each base. If they're pretty fresh and tight or whatever, you want to hold the base. Then you take your lock and work it all the way down. And yes, you're pressing hard with your hand and you're creating a round rope, and you're doing that on its own. If they're really fuzzy and there's hairs all over the place, you can also take your lock and do what's called locksmithing, where your thumb and your pointer finger are now utilizing those to wrap the fingers around the hair down the lock. I promise the more you do this, the more you'll get the muscle memory of what that feels like and what it takes to do. It's really easy for us to slowly add little things into our one little routine of shampooing and drying and separating than it is to do all of this stuff at once. So if you can just get a routine of the cleansing and separating at night, this is the best place to just start at all. From that point, slowly get used to this and this stuff gets faster. From there, we can get into doing other things and other suggestions for stuff. Sometimes we find that our hair doesn't lock up or move up the lock a whole lot and it needs some comb aiding and things like this. This can easily be added in to your own routine if you're good at it yourself. You can also ask somebody to help you do this, separate and bring the comb in and kind of comb stuff up. And oftentimes the hair needs aiding from more of a, inch to an inch and a half space of moving the knots up and closer, and then doing it again to get it up off of the scalp. And then from there, a lot of like finger manipulation and playing with them can be a thing that's added in there as well. Over spiraling, over spinning the hair around the bases all the time can be detrimental if you're doing it too much. On a Caucasian scalp, if we're going tighter and tighter, oftentimes that's too much work with spiraling on our locks. Though this is the best time coming out of the towel when we're stretching everything to go through and get each base with the hair around it to dry like that, because we are essentially creating a wet set with these locks that are now damp and going to dry. A wet set does the same thing that your curling iron, flat iron, blow dryer, any of that stuff does. It sets the hair the way you want it. So just like grandma with the curlers sleeping at night would wake up with curly hair, you are now fashioning your locks with the hair around them that they're supposed to be and letting them dry that way, so your hair is going to know where it wants to go over time. We're also over time creating these round ropes to be stretched out and the hair to go where we want it to go each time we are wet setting them in that stretched motion. It doesn't just happen at once, it happens over multiple wet sets. And so creating the routine is a really good idea in the beginning. Once you have this little routine going, you start to add little things to it. Now for specific questions and additions, I'm gonna get into the bubbles and bobbles and shrinkage that happens in the beginning of a lock journey. And this kind of stuff can really be negated with these routines, especially with the stretching out and putting things where they go when things are damp and really getting in there. You're not going to ruin something by pressing too hard, squishing too hard, pulling too hard. But I would suggest going to a professional for this kind of stuff if you really have big bubbles and bobbles that need fixed. It's probably because we didn't have a routine set up in the beginning and now they've gotten to that point. Oftentimes, they can't really be reversed from there unless things are pulled out and rebuilt. Now, just a few bubbles and bobbles and a little bit of shrinkage that's happening. Usually this can be helped with us just having that little routine and the stretching and all those things in place, because once they start to shrink up, we already have a regular routine that we can also add into working these bubbles out each time a little bit, which if by now our routine went from 25 minutes to 12 minutes, now we add in another 7 minutes of working these bubbles. It's nowhere near what the routine was in the beginning. The first 3 months we were learning how to figure out the muscle memory of stuff, right? And so this is why I like to get in with my clients and be like, don't think it's daunting. Don't think you can't do it. Just start with the little parts that mean the most. And from there, we can get into the rest. Now, these little parts that mean the most are for any hair type. We know this because twist and lock is done at the point of cleansing and coming out of the shampoo bowl. Crochet is typically done 2 or 3 days after cleansing so that the hair is dry and we can comb hair up and then lock it in with a crochet hook. It's typically not done on wet hair because hair will stretch when it's wet, and it doesn't as much when it's dry, but when it's wet to dry, it shrinks back to its original form. So if everything's tight and then shrinks back to its original form, it'll break. This is also why we don't want you getting your hair wet for 2-ish weeks after getting crochet. So if you're at home and thinking, I'm gonna maintain my hair one by one here and there throughout a week with my own crochet hook, sure, that does work for some people, but honestly, you're probably breaking more hair than it's worth in each of those locks that's tight the time you shampoo. It might only be 1 or 2 locks each time you shampoo, but each time there's hair getting broken inside of that lock. Does this mean your locks are gonna fall off or any of this stuff? No, not at all, dude. What it means is, year 5, year 6, you've got these long locks now, and at the ends of these locks, there's hair poking out all over the place. And it's these big fuzzy things that we don't know why they're so fuzzy. And of course you've been crocheting forever, so now you're crocheting it more, which is actually creating a bigger problem than if we at this point in time would take and allow that to be the friction palm rolling that we do when our hair is really loose and nowhere near having a crochet that just tightened it up. We can get in there and give it a friction palm roll, and this will get the hairs and the cuticles to flare open and grab on and grip themselves in. This isn't something you want to do on tight hair, and this is typically something I suggest somebody later on in their journey, that this is where we can do it at a loose stage, getting closer to needing maintenance, so their hair has a lot of growth to it and you can have a lot of room to really get the friction in there and pull. And so you don't want to do this on tight hair. We also don't want to do this on tight styled hair. So like twist and locks and different things like this aren't typically, we don't need to palm roll super kinky or curly hairs anyways. Really a good wavy curly hair doesn't need a whole lot of palm rolling unless we're getting to the point where we're wanting to flare the cuticle and get stuff around it. And that's usually around year 3, 4, and 5. In the beginning maintenance, our biggest things are the separating and the stretching out when they're wet, and creating these round ropes and getting the hair trained to grow in the correct locks. And then from there, everything else really falls into place. Honestly, this much work 1 day a week isn't that hard, with a little bit of separating every night or every morning as well, which is like, what is that? 38 seconds? You know what I mean? It's not very much to separate your hair out. When you think about how easy it is to just go boom and do your hair, when we contemplate how easy it is throughout the entire week to be ready, then this 1 day of self-care is almost even more warranted, especially if we're the kind of person that doesn't pay enough attention to our self-care already. It's a really good spot to start. So that video is originally half an hour long. I'm cutting it off right there. It seemed like a good spot to stop. If you guys want to see the rest of that video, let me know and I'll get to editing it. It's obviously old. You can see I've started my locks since then. I've finished my fire pit, so I'm looking at doing that in the next little bit. I have a few things recorded throughout the process of starting this that I'll be posting, so stay tuned for those to get dropped. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. If you want to see the rest of this video, then comment down below and I'll get to editing that so that I can post it. I just think it's been taking a long time to do it, so I figured I'd just get this out. Anyways, guys, happy locking.